So as we start this brand new lecture, we're looking at the Table of Nations and the 70 disciples. What did you find interesting about all of that when you did the homework? What stood out to you?
I can see there's a pretty common theme that there's kind of being shown. God always uses numbers to show certain aspects of things, like the number 7 being perfection, or number 8 being new birth, and in this he's kind of representing what most people believe is he's representing these 70 disciples as the 72 nations that are mentioned in Genesis 10, I believe, and kind of drawing that connection to sending out these disciples as like the Gentile nations, as well as the Hebrew ones mentioned in Genesis 10. He's kind of drawing that connection of sending out, where he has his 12 apostles to begin with, who were Jews, and he sends out these 70 and gives them equal authority in the name of Jesus with these 12 Jewish, apostles. While they still were probably Jews, that this representation, symbolism of the 70 going out and being like Gentiles in a way, and giving them equal authority and inheritance through the blood of Jesus.
It's interesting, is it not, the symbolism of what Jesus does. So, the 12, what's he doing with the 12, would you imagine? Pretty simple thing to say, okay, is this some kind of reconstituted Israel, remade Israel? You realize that many of the names of the disciples are names of previous tribes. I don't know if anyone's ever shown you this, and when, like, I saw it the first time, it kind of blew my mind. But what's the name of the guy who betrays Jesus? Judas. So I'm going to type in the word Judas, and I'm going to do a search. So search everywhere in the Bible that the word Judas appears, and the first one is Matthew 10:4, and so you can see that it's 21 verses there or something like that. I'm going to do the same search. Now, what did Judas do to Jesus? Help me with that story when he betrayed. What did he do? He sold him for how much money? 30 pieces of silver. Okay, I'm going to do the same search. So I'm going to do a lemma search in the Greek. And that's going to pull up all these things. And what do you find bizarre about that? It brings up the name Judah. Because the word Judah and the word Judas are exactly the same word in Greek. Now, I just want to show you a different way to look at that. So we'll look in the New Testament, and so we'll look at this word, Matthew 1:2. So I'm going to type it in here, Matthew 1:2. And I'm going to do this word Judah. But I'm going to say, do a lemma search for me. In other words, show me every place in the Bible where that appears. And when you do that, I remember the first time I saw this, it kind of blew my mind. But when you do that and you look at well, how is that word translated in different places? And what do you see? Well, a lot of times it's translated Judas. A few times it's translated Jude. And a lot of times it's translated Judah. And the truth is that all three of those are the exact same word in Greek. Jude, Judah, and Judas. Now, if that's the case, and it is the case, I mean, all of these prove it, did Judah ever sell anyone for money in the story? He did. He sold Joseph. He's the one who says, let's kill him, or they say, let's kill him. And Judas said, let's not kill him. Let's sell him. And how much do they sell Joseph for? Remember, the first time I saw this, it blew my mind. How much do they sell Joseph? You would think 30 pieces, but it's actually not 30 pieces. See if you can find it in your text. Matter of fact, I'll give an extra participation day to whoever finds it. How much does Judah / Judas sell Joseph for in the story?
20 shekels of silver.
20 shekels of silver. And what chapter is that in?
That is in 37. Genesis 37.
Genesis 37. Okay, so what do you find interesting about that? They sell them for 20 pieces of silver. Why do they sell them for 20 pieces of silver? There's a reason they sell him for 20 shekels.
The going rate for slaves, wasn't it?
Well, you would think that. It's actually a little bit deeper than that. And this is going to draw us into that whole thing is the Bible anti-woman. So you're going to hear something and don't let the hair on the back of your neck stand up. Just trust me, this is going to go to a good place. Why did they sell Joseph for 20 pieces of silver? The reason is because there's a going rate for people under 20 years old. And there's a list. And the list is here. If a person, this is like if you accidentally kill somebody and the family lets you make restitution, it says the valuation of a male, this is Leviticus 27:3, 20 years old to 60 shall be 50 shekels. And a shekel is worth 2 denarii. A denarius is worth 1 day's wage, about $100. So a shekel is worth about $200. I can show you in Scripture why that's the case, but if you trust me, we'll just do the math. Okay? So how much would, if a shekel is worth 2 denarii, and a denarius is worth $100, how much would 50 shekels be? How much money would 50 shekels be? $10,000. So if you accidentally kill someone, the family has a right to seek vengeance on you. If they show you grace, you can pay $10,000 and they'll forgive you for accidentally killing their family member. Okay. So how much is somebody under 20 years old? If the person is 5 years old up to 20 years old, the valuation for a male will be 20 shekels. So how much money is that? $4,000. And how old is Joseph when he's sold into slavery? May or may not notice he's 17 years old. So what are they getting for Joseph?
A lot more than what they should be.
Yeah, I mean, they're selling. They shouldn't sell him, but as 70 years old, if they're getting, don't they sell him for 20 shekels? So they're getting the going rate of his death. All right? Now, if you're a woman, this is going to offend you a little bit, but hang on. This is going to a good place. If the person is a female, the valuation is 30 shekels. If we read this whole chapter, it's the same price for a slave. So what's the going rate for an adult man 20 years old to 50 years old? 50. What's the going rate for a woman that same age? 30. And how much do they give for Jesus?
30.
Why do they give 30? What are the chief priests insinuating in giving 30, not 50? Right, they're giving the price of a woman or a slave. Is that an insult to you, to Jesus, do you think? It's meant to be an insult. Is Jesus' death the price of one woman? Absolutely, it's the price of one woman. One woman who's going to be the empress of the universe with her emperor husband, and the two of them, in loving each other, will be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth, subdue it, rule over the birds of the air, the fish of the sea, and all the creeps that creep on the ground. They meant it as an insult. God meant it as meta-narrative beauty. So who sells Joseph? This sexually pure person that the more he loves God, the more they hate him because of his pure life. Who does that? Judah. And what's his name in the Greek Bible? Judas. And who sells Jesus for 30 pieces of silver? Judas. And how many disciples are there in the first group? What do you make of that? What's going on? So we're trying to figure out these numbers and the table of nations, and what do you think's going on in terms of the meta-narrative?
It's representative of 12 tribes of Israel.
Right. Israel has rejected God as king. And God, just like Joseph, says you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. Some people would say, oh, well, that's anti-Semitic. You're saying that the Jews sold Jesus. Well, read the Joseph story. What happens to Judah in the Joseph story? Joseph backs him into a corner where Judah finally does something good. He finally says, look, my father's going to die at Benjamin. Look, take me and let him go. And when he does that, Joseph can't control himself anymore. Joseph has made Judah good. Joseph has has taken wicked Judah and made him giving Judah. And then you step back and look at the meta-narrative and you realize, what is God doing? I mean, the people who rejected, is God just saying, well, I'm through with you, and there's no, or is God saying, you meant it for evil, God meant it for good? What else did you find interesting about the homework today? Had you ever looked at the Table of Nations before? So, Evan, what did you find interesting about the Table of Nations?
Well, you had to search for pictures of it, and they came in a variety of forms. There was one that was kind of eye-popping to me because it looked just like the other pictures, the disbursement of the nations, but it was actually based on chromosomal research. So,
yeah.
And it showed the hub right there around where Israel would be.
Crossroads of humanity,
And
Fertile
the
Crescent.
arrows going out these different directions. I thought that's very interesting. That if you're just glancing at the homework, you're thinking, "Oh, that's a little picture of what happened at Babel."
Yeah.
That's based on, examining the genetic similarity of people and drawing it back to a certain spot, which looks like where the Tower of Babel would have been.
Did anybody count up how many names are in the Table of Nations? What did you come up with?
I got 79 one time, and I got 76, and I got 79 again. Somewhere in there.
Yeah.
71.
So there's a little bit of difficulty. One way to count it, you end up with 70. Another way to count it, you end up with 72. One of those numbers is probably right. We don't know which one. There are a couple of names. Depends on which manuscript you follow. Evan?
Isn't that a variant in the text too?
It's a variant.
New Testament?
It's a variant in the New Testament, in the text of the New Testament. So when you come to Luke 2, Luke's the only one who tells us. So it says the 70-72, but when you look at it in the Greek text, what do you see? The number, that's the number 2 duo, like dynamic duo, right? What do you see about that number 2 there in the Greek text? It's in parentheses, which means the editor said, look, we made a decision here. Some manuscripts have it, some don't. And look at the ESV versus the New American Standard. What do you notice about that? ESV goes with 72. New American Standard goes with 70. Whenever you get Bibles that are as good as the ESV and New American Standard and they differ on something, that lets you know that there's some kind of issue involved. I don't know which one of these numbers is correct. What I do know is that if you count up the Table of Nations in the Septuagint, in the Greek translation, you get 72. If you count up the nations in the Hebrew text, you get 70. I don't know which one of those is right. One of them's right. I just don't know which one it is. But in some ways, we don't have to know which one is right to make the connection, because what the Old Testament is doing is saying that the number of people who went down to Egypt, the number of sons who go down to Egypt, equal the number of nations in the Table of Nations. So connect that in the story with me. So that many people go down to Egypt. There are that many nations in the world. What's the grand meta-narrative purpose? Like, what does God want to happen? right? He wants the nations to be reunited. He wants Israel to live godly lives. And what's the hope that those godly lives will do? When we're in the eschatological restoration of the Garden of Eden, how many nations of the earth will be represented in terms of tribes, tongues, people groups? How many? All of them. So, what's the purpose then of the sons of Israel being the same number as the table of nations in the meta-narrative?
They're going out into all the nations to spread the word.
Right, so it's God's purpose that he wants to save all of humanity. And whatever's happening with Jesus here, whichever one of these readings is right, we're meant to connect it to the table of nations. And the promise to Abraham. So Abraham's promise occurs here. Lord said to Abram, go from your country, from your kindred, from your father's house, to the land I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great. It's interesting that this word name, your name, is your Shem. You know, Ham, Shem, and Japheth. And you may remember that the Tower of Babel, the people are trying to build their way up to God. They're trying to make a name for themselves, a Shem for themselves. God won't have it. God comes to Abraham and says, I will make your name great. You won't make your name great. I will make your name great. And then he says this, he makes this promise. I will bless the one blessing you, singular. The one who makes little of you, I will curse. And in you, all the mishpachot ha'adam, all the families of the earth will be blessed. How many families will be blessed? Would you take 69? What's the promise? All. That's a beautiful promise, right? Okay, I want you to help me with something. A little slow on math here, but how many nations get blessed? How many out of the 70 get blessed in Abraham? 70. So if you're a lawyer and you're representing your client and he has a piece of paper that says, I will do this, how many are you going to argue for in terms of blessing? All of them. 70. So can I play the devil's advocate? It can't be 70 because before Genesis 12, God cursed the Canaanites. And the Canaanites make up about 20 of those nations. Right? Canaan is the firstborn of Mitzrayim, which is Egypt. And the Hittites, the Amorites, the Jebusites, the Perizzites, you know that list? Those are the people who get exterminated, right? Doesn't God say, show them no mercy? Doesn't God say, kill the men, women, children? Don't leave anything. Don't let your eye have compassion. The Canaanites are cursed by Noah. And evidently God is following up on that curse because when they go into the promised land, he's having them exterminate the Canaanites. What do you do with that?
Was Israel ever under a curse?
Was Israel ever under a curse? Do you know what the word for curse is in the Bible? Well, I'm glad you asked. Because I'm going to go to Matthew 1:1 and then go back one verse. So this takes me to last chronological word in the Hebrew Bible. And this is the word. It's the word cherem. I will turn the heart of the fathers to the children and the heart of the children to the fathers, lest I come and strike the land with cherem, with total, absolute, complete, utter destruction. And if we do a limit search, we're going to see that it occurs. And we're just going through these. The Lord devoted to utter destruction. Mutilated, it means there. Devoted. You can see the word in Greek, anathema. Have you ever heard that word before? This is talking about complete and utter destruction. So you're going to have a great question. What great question do you have? Jonathan, I think you're going to have a great question, or Evan, or is it Josh? Jonah, or someone else. What? So you got the promise. That's all. We've got the 70. The sons of Israel are 70 or 72, however you count it. What do you do with this blessing of all the nations in light of the apparent utter Canaanite curse?
I could ask, was Israel ever cursed? I don't think you can look back even further and say, was man ever cursed?
Was man ever cursed? And what's the answer to that? He was cursed. He was cursed with death. If you eat of the fruit of this tree, you will surely die. And he ate. And so what should God do? Right, and it's odd. I want to see if I can show you this. Tree of knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day, and have any of you taken Hebrew? I mean, the way I'm reading that, on the day of your eating, it doesn't say you will die. That's this. It's infinitive construct. You take this to the bank. The day you eat it, take this to the bank. You will surely die. You eat it, you surely will die. Now, what's the problem with that in terms of putting the pieces of the story together? Adam reaches out his hand And Eve does, and then Eve gives it. And Adam eats. And what's the problem? He didn't die that day. God said, take it to the bank. You will surely die. And what happens is he eats it, and he lives 930 years. What do you do with that, Jonathan?
Either they were previously immortal, or it's a spiritual death.
It's a spiritual death. And is there anything in the New Testament that would say it was a spiritual death? Doesn't Ephesians 2 say you were, what does it say? You were dead in your trespasses and sins, and you were made alive in Christ Jesus? So if things reproduce after their kind, cows make cows, trees make trees, grass makes grass, fish make fish, what kind of offspring will two spiritually dead people always produce? Spiritually dead. And did your mom and dad ever sit you down, maybe on your second birthday or something, and say, okay, sweetie, this is how you tell a lie? Jonathan, your parents never sat you down and said, they never sat you down and said, this is how you be selfish? Never sat you down and said, this is how you hide your sin? Oh, really? You were just kind of born with those natural abilities? Doesn't the scripture say from the moment conception, in sin did my mother conceive me? Look, David is the 8th son. Those people have been married forever, right? It's not saying the act was, it's saying that when my mother conceived me, I was a sinner. That moment I was a sinner. Why? Because I was born spiritually dead. I inherited physical corruption from my parents. And when I lie, when I cheat, when I steal, when I do any of the other laundry list of sins, I am simply doing what my nature tells me to do. I got it honest and out. Nobody had to teach me how to do those things. I just could do it. What should happen to Adam? What should have, if you were God and you just wanted to put this cosmic stop sign up and say, don't sin against God, and you knew that in seed form, that when Adam reached out his hand to take the fruit, breaking God's law, that in that act lay all the murders, all the rapes all the child molestation, all the armed robberies, all the dictators who were that in that act, in seed form, when he took that and ate and rebelled against God and rejected the rule of God in favor of his own self-rule, what would be a fair punishment for that? Like you're God and you just want the whole world to know, don't rebel against God. You just want to give absolute justice to stop sin in its tracks. What would be just?
Wipe out man and start over.
Wipe out man and start over. But
It wasn't too hard to make him in the first place.
But that's not very artistic. I mean, you want this to be poetic justice. Like, how are you going to wipe him out?
Oh.
So he's tried to cover up his nakedness. He's tried to hide his sin. What would you do? You're God.
All that shame for all it's worth.
I mean, are you going to strip away his fig leaf and just utter shame? He brought shame. He brought misery to all that. Are you just going to get him His action brought thorns and thistles to a beautiful world. Would you include that in the judgment? Would you maybe hang him on his tree of rebellion? Hang him cursed on his tree of rebellion? And do you see where this is going? What did Jesus undergo? He was mocked as a sham king with thorns and thistles. Where do thorns and thistles come from? The curse. In art, the crucifixion is usually not depicted as naked, but crucifixions were naked. And we know they were naked because they rip up his outer clothes and they gamble for his inner clothes. And if somebody rips up your outer clothes and they gamble for your inner clothes, you're naked. And he was hung on not a living tree, but a dead tree. And the scripture in Deuteronomy 20 and then Joshua 8 and 10 and Galatians 3 all say, cursed is the one who's hanged on the tree. Jesus died under the cherem of God's wrath against sin. And that wrath was due to every single person who's ever rejected God's rule in favor of their self-rule. And I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but I'm just going to type in the word Canaanite. And it occurs those places in the Old Testament. But what do you notice about this place? That's a New Testament use. What should we do? We should look at it. Now, what should have happened to every single Canaanite who ever lived? What should have happened based on total destruction? So the fact that this woman is alive, why is this woman alive? Because they didn't do it. Behold, there was a Canaanite woman from that region, came out and was crying, have mercy on us, son of David. My daughter is severely demon-possessed. Now, Canaanites were people who had used sex, and not normal sex, like perverted sex, to worship demons, right? They killed babies in that process. They read about what they did in Leviticus 18 through 20. They were horrible people. We have archaeological sites where 30,000 baby skeletons are part of these fertility cult rituals have been killed. These people had worshipped demons with perverted sex and killed babies for centuries. What could Jesus have said to this woman who said, have mercy on us? My daughter's demon-possessed. What could he have said? He could have said, you're getting exactly what you deserve. You rejected God. You worship demons. Now demons are abusing your little girl. You're getting what you deserve. But what does Jesus say to this woman? It's weird what he says at first. He did not answer her a word. His disciples came and begged him, saying, send her away. She's making this spectacle, crying after us. He answered and said, I was only sent to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. The 12 tribes of Israel are the ones that I was meant to bring good stuff to. I'm not dealing with this Canaanite woman. She came and knelt before him. And those of you who've had Greek, what is this word normally? Proskune. What's it related to? Worship. In fact, the root of it is to do the dog, right? kineo, you ever seen a dog in abject just crawl up and just totally submit? That's what this woman was doing to Jesus. Kuria, boye, they moi, help me. Jesus replied to her. Does this sound like the normal way Jesus talks? Jesus replied, said, it's not a good thing to take the bread of the children and to throw it to the little dogs. He's just called this woman a dog. Right? Notice what the woman says. She said, yes, Lord, but even the little dogs eat from the crumbs. I'm not asking to be a child. Let us eat from the crumbs of the blessing. Then Jesus said, O woman, your faith is megale, is great. Let it be done to you as you want. And immediately her daughter was healed. So does Jesus see validity of the Canaanite curse? Initially, yes. But here's where the beauty comes in and where we'll pick up next time. The reason he can bless her is because he is going to die as the cursed Canaanite king on a tree. His obedience earned her blessing, and she can go free. We'll talk about that next time.